Hello everybody, Chris Prophy, Musically Obsessed. Today we are going to dig deep into the SST catalog and talk about a band called the Tar Babies. Now, the Tar Babies are a band from Madison, Wisconsin, led by Frank Buckley on voice and guitars. He also goes by the name of Bucky Pope. I've seen it written Frank Buckley and Bucky Pope. It seemed to be Bucky Pope in later albums. I think I have everything that they released. I mean, if there are some Tar Baby fans out there that, would, disagree with me, just let me know. Their first two albums were on a label called Bone Air Records. Their first album was called Face the Music, that came out in 1983. And their second album was called Respect Your Nightmares, that came out in 1985. They were both 12-inch EPs. I have them each on this CD. And this has their first two albums, Face the Music and Respect Your Nightmares, plus it's got some extra tracks on it as well. This was the cover of their first EP called Face the Music. And this was the cover of their second EP called Respect Your Nightmares. Okay. Now, the Tar Babies' first EP, Face the Music, sounds nothing like what their later stuff would sound like. Face the Music is in-your-face, hardcore punk noise, and noise in a good way. It reminds me, when I listen to it, of early Suicidal Tendencies, of the Meat Puppets' first album, early DRI, and the first Corrosion of Conformity album called Eye for an Eye, which I really love that album. If you like that first Corrosion of Conformity album, you would love the first Tar Babies album called Face the Music. And I think you still can get it. I think it's expensive though. So that was what the Tar Babies sounded like on their first EP back in 1983. Think about Corrosion of Conformity, Eye for an Eye, you get the idea. Now, then they came out in 85 with Respect Your Nightmares, and it still had some of those hardcore elements, but they started to bring in some funk and some groove to their songs. And I'm going to call it dirty funk punk. I should really enter Logan Archer's contest. He was talking about creating a genre. Maybe I'll create the genre dirty funk punk, because that's what Tar Babies' Respect Your Nightmare sounds like. It's got hardcore elements, but then they're bringing in a little bit of that funk element to the music as well. Okay, so those were the first Tar Baby albums on Bone Air Records. And then they moved to the Magic label, SST, and came out with an album called Fried Milk. Check that cover out. So cool. Here's the back cover. Okay. Now, this is where the Tar Babies started to develop their sound. They dropped a lot of those hardcore elements and they moved more into the funk. It's almost sort of like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but not exactly Red Hot Chili Peppers. I find them actually a little bit more interesting than the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They've got an alternative vibe to their music, definitely some funk in there. But if you like early Red Hot Chili Peppers before they became commercial, you would dig this album, Fried Milk. All right, so this album came out in 1987. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Then, my favorite album by the Tar Babies. This album is called No Contest. This came out in 1988. Here's the back cover. There they are, the Tar Babies. Why is this my favorite album? Well, because they started to bring some horns into the mix here. There's a player on here named Tony Jarvis who plays a whole bunch of instruments. The alto sax, tenor sax, clarinet, flute, a whole bunch of other instruments. He brings that horn element into the music along with that funk and that Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe. But then you start to get some extended jams on this album. some jazz influence as well. Almost, dare I say, jam band type elements in this music as well. So I just love how everything came together in this album, and you have the horns, you have a jazz, you have funk, you have jam band, you have extended jams, you've got a Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe, plus just the uniqueness of the Tar Babies. Bucky Pope has an interesting style of singing that I feel like sets them apart. So this is my favorite Tar Babies album. And if you were going to check them out, I'd say start with this album first. So this came out in 1988. Then in 1989, they came out with an album called Honey Bubble. And this was also on the SST label. This continued with the sound that they were perfecting on No Contest. It's got less of the horns in it. It's still a really good album. I find No Contest is better though. This was the last album on SST. Still a really good album. You can't go wrong with anything by the Tar Babies. But I prefer No Contest over Honey Bubble. And then they switched labels in 1992. They came out with an album on Sonic Noise. Oh, let me see if I can get the glare off of there. And this is an album called Death Trip. This came out in 1992. I actually have the CD in there because I want to play you something. This is very similar to what they were doing on Fried Milk and No Contest and Honey Bubble. But on this album, they started to bring in sort of a ska element to their music. And as I was listening to it today, I'm going to play you a little bit. It reminded me of sort of like early Mighty Mighty Boss Tone type stuff. So I feel like the Tar Babies were kind of playing with all of these sounds that were starting to develop. And unfortunately, they kind of fell under the radar because I think they could have been bigger than they were. But I'm going to play you a little bit of the song called Trials and Tribulations, and I want you to kind of hear some of the ska element. Great summertime music, actually. Sounds nothing like their first album. Nothing. I'm going to stop it. I don't want to get in trouble. But that kind of gives you an idea of what the Tar Babies sounded like at the end. And that's what No Contest sounds like too, my favorite album. So that's the Tar Babies. I have a feeling a lot of you have never heard of them. I had never heard of them till about, a year ago or so. Great band, unique band. Like I said, if you like Red Hot Chili Peppers, if you like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, definitely check them out. If you like, early hardcore, Corrosion of Conformity, early DRI, check out their first couple albums, Face the Music or Respect Your Nightmare. So I feel like the Tar Babies have a lot to offer. I'd be interested to know what you guys think, and maybe there might be some other Tar Baby fans out there. I'm not sure. But listen, enjoy the rest of your day. And listen to the Tar Babies.